You have to see that there's a big time gap between starting a startup, so being the early stages where early stage VCs are mostly active, and the company exiting. And some companies, for example, took like 10, 11, 12 years, like a Spotify, for example. And so the companies now that start out now think they might IPO in 10, 15 years or 5 to 15 years in a broader span. And I think there people are very bullish on Europe as an ecosystem as well as the UK.
When it comes to the UK specifically, what edge does the UK have in terms of where the most innovative companies are placed?
I think in general, the UK is very well positioned in the whole wave of AI. And as undoubtedly everyone agrees, is AI is the biggest trend that we see in the ecosystem right now. And the UK and Europe have been home to some of the prime research lab. I mean, DeepMind has been one of the most important companies in the AI space. And
easy to forget that they're a Cambridge-based startup.
100%. And we see a lot of great talent actually coming out of DeepMind or other we call them startup factories, and building and founding new companies.
Let me just bring in some of the stories we're reading into you on, because for me, there's a really big fintech narrative too around the UK. The fact that you've got three big players in the sector now pressuring the Chancellor for some better rules, that there are actually incentives for investors here in the UK at a time when Wise upped and left in terms of its headquarters to the US markets. The fact is that we've had a real dearth of these fintech players coming to the IPO market anyway. Klarna being the big one, Zilch, we're waiting for them, Revolut. You've been an early investor in the likes of Klarna. What do you want to see from some of these fintech players in terms of coming to the market, whether it's the UK or just any market at all soon?
And coming to the public markets?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, it was about 5 years ago. I was in Amsterdam talking to these companies about their IPO plans back then. They still haven't come to market.
Yeah, I think for some of these players, as sort of like the media reports say, it's pretty near term. But yeah, I mean, people are looking to hit the market at the right point of time. And we also have to acknowledge that the IPO markets have been more dynamic or less dynamic in the past 2-3 years. But in 2025, we see the momentum re-accelerating. We just saw Figma coming, sort of like filing their S1. We saw Chime going public in the US. And so we think the window is opening again.
I just want to follow up on the fintech nature here for the UK, because it feels like it's a natural home, London, for fintech players. And the negotiations here around changing stamp duty, providing some sort of tax capital gains incentive, that seems like a long way off from where the Chancellor is at in terms of tackling some of the fiscal headroom that she simply doesn't have. What would you say about how the UK can attract those fintech companies to public markets?
Yeah, I think what's most important is the dialogue between the tech leaders that are soon going IPO and the next generation that will do so in a few years, and the regulators. And I think there it can be even closer and needs to be even more progressive. And you mentioned stamp duty as a very important example that was also mentioned by some of these players. And I think we need to foster that discussion even more and act on it. Because what we need in the UK and Europe is make it as attractive as possible for companies to IPO here in the UK.
So firstly, let me get this off my chest. I have never read such an interesting bio on a company website as yours. Most of them are dull as ditch water. I mean, there's pictures of you in lederhosen, there's donuts, there's your history as a tourist rickshaw driver. For a start, well done, because most of them are so boring. Now, one thing you do say in there as well, which I think is really interesting, is you quickly learned how the value of some companies can plummet to zero. And with that in mind, I want to invoke the power law. And you know more about the power law than I will ever know. But basically, you're looking for the 1 in 10, which can go exponential. What I think is very interesting is that you're not, actually. You guys are doing better than that as well. And that's why I want to dig into how you're doing better than that. I think 1 in 6 of your companies invested is becoming a unicorn. And you've had several IPOs amongst that as well. What are you doing in an era where the competition to finance these young companies is probably more rife than ever? What are you doing to get 1 in 6 compared to the others?
I mean, the key is always to meet the best and most ambitious founders across Europe.
They're all ambitious and they all think they're the best. That's why they're founders.
That's true. And that's why it's fun to meet them every day and talk with them. But I think it's really about a few things of like getting in front of them. And there are 35,000 early stage companies in Europe. And we look at a couple of thousand of early stage companies in Europe. And Creandum then invests into roughly 10 to 15 per year. So it's all about that filtering process of how to get from a few thousand that you look at to 10 to 15 a year.
They'll watch this show, or they'll get this clip now. This is important. I'm coming to you with a pitch. I don't know what it is. What's the best thing that's going to attract your attention? And then I want you to tell our viewers, or me, or whoever, what's the worst thing? Because you've seen, how many pitches have you seen in your time, do you reckon? Tens of thousands? Or thousands, hundreds, thousands, whatever.
No, hundreds, but like
okay, so they're all watching that. This is absolutely pivotal, because I know a lot of people have been in your position, and a lot of people have been presenting to you. Go on, the best thing and the worst thing they can do.
I think the best thing is really clearly present sort of like your idea and why it become really, really big. I think in particular for venture capitalists, it's about the power law, which you already mentioned earlier. And that's about the big outcomes, like the Spotifys, the Klarnas, the Revoluts. Yeah. Exactly. And so really conveying how your idea, how your startup will be one of those mega generational companies, be a $5 billion plus.
And what's the one where you press the red button and say, sorry mate, this is rubbish?
I think if you're not able to articulate that well, or if you're not, clearly have thought through your idea or thought through the market or spent time on the market. I think in particular in the early stage, it's really important to have a unique insight, to have an idea that can stand out, or have the market researched extremely well.
To that point, the AI agent story is the hot area in technology universe. Everybody wants an agent, everybody's coming up with an agent. What are you seeing that moves the needle on where we take agents in the next 10 years?
Agents are the big trend, and I think we see agents being applied in particular right now across verticals and business functions. So if you think about it, things like legal AI, marketing AI, or even in coding. And so we believe that sort of like all functions in organizations and verticals will see a lot of penetration from these like agents that bring a lot of productivity to these sectors.
It's like the apps back in the day, right? Everybody will see an app for something. Now we'll see an agent for something.
Absolutely, yeah. And we see them getting so powerful that the work they deliver is actually of high quality and actually usable for companies.
When you talk to major public market investors, the most successful, Chris Hohn, for example, at TCI, they emphasize how critical the moat is when it comes to identifying a company that's going to be successful over the long term. When you're looking at such early stage companies, how do you identify whether or not a company has a moat? And is that something that's as critical to your investment thesis as it is to somebody like Chris Hohn?
100%. I think that's the ideal case. You look for defensibility, you look for moats, you look for unfair advantages, for unique insights, things that make you stand out among the crowd. But moats can come from different things. It could come from network effects, but also I think in the current wave of AI, we see also more intangible things, creating some defensibility, which could also be brand. If I think about, for example, Lovable, one of our portfolio companies, everyone knows it in the text-to-code space. Like if you're doing something in that space, the awareness is just so high. And I think while moat, in the traditional sense, was always more based around things like network effect or technical moats, we see other types of moats evolving at the moment as well.